Dr. Emma Hayes suppressed a yawn as she watched the UN Security Council meeting deteriorate into yet another shouting match. On the massive screen before her, ambassadors traded thinly veiled threats over the latest South China Sea crisis. 3 carrier groups were engaged in a dangerous dance of chicken, and her analysis suggested a 68% chance of military conflict within the next 48 hours. Perhaps we should consider implementing the Singapore Protocol, she suggested into her microphone, fighting to keep the exhaustion from her voice. The protocol was her life's work, a framework for de-escalating military tensions through staged withdrawal and third-party verification. But before anyone could respond, every screen in the chamber went dark. "Technical difficulties," muttered Robert Chen, her assistant, already reaching for his tablet. But Emma's attention had shifted to the strange quality of light filtering through the UN building's vast windows. The afternoon sun had taken on an opalescent sheen, as if viewed through a soap bubble. The chamber erupted in a cascade of chirping phones and buzzing devices. Emma's own phone vibrated with emergency alerts, but she was already moving toward the windows, drawn by an inexplicable certainty that something momentous was about to happen. The sky above New York split open. There was no other way to describe it. A seam of crystalline light unzipped the atmosphere, spreading like frost across a window pane. Through the growing gap, something massive began to emerge, a vessel that defied conventional geometry, its surface a maze of translucent facets that caught and refracted the sunlight in impossible ways. "My God," Robert whispered, pressing against the glass beside her. "That's not one of ours." Emergency sirens began to wail across Manhattan. On the streets below, traffic ground to a halt as people emerged from their vehicles to stare upward. The ship, if that's what it was, continued its stately emergence from the spatial rift until it hung above the city like a suspended mountain of living crystal. Emma's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a direct message from General Marion at NORAD. "Tell me you're seeing this. They're appearing everywhere, over every major city. No hostile actions detected." Her fingers flew across the screen. "How many?" 12. No, correction. 15. Perfectly synchronized arrival. The chamber behind her had descended into chaos. Ambassadors were shouting into phones, demanding updates, calling for military responses. But Emma noticed something else. Something that made her breath catch in her throat. "Robert," she said quietly, "check the South China Sea." He pulled up satellite feeds on his tablet, and they watched together as 3 carrier groups, American, Chinese, and Vietnamese, began systematic withdrawal from their conflict positions. No orders had been given. No agreements had been reached. Yet each fleet was executing a perfect synchronized withdrawal, as if guided by an invisible hand. A new light filled the chamber, softer, more focused. Emma turned to find a holographic figure hovering in the center of the room. It was vaguely humanoid, but composed entirely of shifting patterns of light, like the surface of a star rendered in miniature. "Greetings, United Nations of Earth," it said, its voice a harmony of tones that somehow formed perfect English. "We are the Harmonious Collective, and we have been watching your world with great interest." The being's gaze, if that's what the swirling patterns at the apex of its form represented, seemed to fix directly on Emma. "Particularly those among you who understand the true nature of peace." Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that everything she understood about conflict resolution was about to change. What she didn't know was that she had already been chosen for a role that would reshape humanity's place in the cosmos. The being's next words confirmed it. "We would like to propose an alliance." Katie Mitchell never imagined her kindergarten conflict resolution techniques would interest aliens. Yet here she stood in the UN's hastily assembled First Contact Center, watching a being of pure light analyze her classroom footage with unnerving intensity. "Fascinating," said Zix, the Harmonious Collective's ambassador. The child with the red hair just surrendered her most valued possession, this unicorn plushie, to resolve a dispute. Yet our scans indicate no coercion, no logical imperative. Simply empathy. Emma Hayes stood beside Katie, equally fascinated by the alien's reaction. After a week of first contact protocols and preliminary discussions, this was not what anyone had expected. The collective had bypassed their military capabilities, their technological achievements, even their diplomatic corps, to focus on playground dynamics. "That's Lily," Katie explained, trying to hide her nervousness. She noticed Jenny was having a bad day because her parents are divorcing. The sharing wasn't about the toy. It was about showing she cared. Zix's luminescent form, pulsed with what they'd learned, was excitement. "Precisely. Your species possesses an extraordinary capacity for emotional problem-solving that defies our quantum empathy metrics. We've observed 17 diplomatic techniques in this single sharing circle that our most advanced systems never conceived." The holoprojector shifted to display another recording, this time of Katie resolving a four-way dispute over building blocks. Her signature technique: instead of assigning blame, she guided the children to create something together, turning competitors into collaborators. Ms. Mitchell's success rate in conflict resolution exceeds our most optimized diplomatic AIs. Another collective member, Ven, chimed in. "We've analyzed similar scenarios across 1,000 worlds. No other species naturally develops such sophisticated emotional intelligence during early development." Emma leaned forward. "Are you saying you came to Earth because of our kindergarten teachers?" "Not exactly," Zix replied, their form shifting into what they'd learned was their equivalent of a smile. "We came because of what your kindergarten teachers represent. Your species appears chaotic, violent, prone to conflict. Yet you've developed extraordinary methods of resolution, while other species either avoid conflict entirely or rely on pure logic. Humans dance with it." The holoprojector displayed a new series of images: historical peace treaties, hostage negotiations, family therapy sessions, and international mediation efforts. Alongside each, quantum readings showed complex emotional and psychological patterns that made Emma's head spin. "You're Dr. Hayes' Singapore protocol," Zix continued. "It works because it acknowledges both rational and irrational factors. Other species create peace through force or logic. Humans create peace through understanding." Katie watched in amazement as her simple classroom techniques were mapped against galactic-scale conflicts, her method of having children express their feelings through drawing. Apparently, it could work on quantum-based civilizations. Her listening corner concept, adaptable for telepathic species in diplomatic crisis. "This is why we need you," Ven said solemnly. "The galaxy faces conflicts our traditional methods cannot resolve. We believe human emotional intelligence, particularly this remarkable combination of empathy and practical problem-solving, may be the key." Emma felt a chill. "What kinds of conflicts?" Zix's form darkened slightly. "We would like to present you with 3 challenges, cases that have resisted all known forms of resolution. If humanity can solve them." The being hesitated. "We would propose not just an alliance, but a special role for Earth within the collective." "What role?" Katie asked, though something in her gut told her she already knew the answer. Earth would become the galaxy's peacemakers, its diplomatic corps, its kindergarten teachers, in a sense. Zix's form brightened again. "But first, you must prove yourselves. We need a team. Not traditional diplomats, but those who truly understand the human art of conflict resolution." Katie looked at Emma, and both women saw the same mix of terror and excitement in each other's eyes. They were about to take humanity's methods of making peace to the stars. And somewhere in Kansas, a kindergarten sharing circle was about to become a model for galactic diplomacy. A kindergarten teacher, a hostage negotiator, a Native American elder, and a game designer walk into a bar, Jack Reynolds quipped, dropping into his seat at the UN's secure conference room. "Sounds like the start of a bad joke." "Good thing we're in a conference room then," Tyler Rodriguez replied without looking up from his tablet. where he was already modeling conflict scenarios in his latest diplomatic simulation engine. Maya Blackwood, her silver hair contrasting with sharp eyes that missed nothing, smiled slightly. The coyote was considered both a trickster and a teacher in many stories. Sometimes the best wisdom comes packaged in unexpected ways. Emma Hayes watched the odd group from the head of the table. After screening hundreds of candidates, these were the ones the collective had chosen. Not career diplomats or political leaders, but people who understood conflict at its most fundamental level. "Let's begin," she announced, activating the holographic display. The image of Zix materialized, their luminescent form casting strange shadows across the room. "Your first challenge involves the Helios and the Voidborn," the alien ambassador explained. "Two species locked in conflict over stellar energy rights. But before we proceed, we must verify your team's problem-solving capabilities." The room's lights dimmed, and a simulation engulfed them. They found themselves standing in what appeared to be a nuclear reactor on the brink of meltdown. "Classic pressure test," Jack muttered, already scanning for exits and threats, hostage negotiator instincts kicking in. But Katie Mitchell was already moving, her kindergarten teacher's intuition spotting patterns others missed. "Look at the control panels," she said. "The symbols. They're not just warnings. They're expressing emotions." Tyler snapped his fingers. "Like emoticons. The interface is trying to communicate on multiple levels." Maya moved slowly around the room, her hand hovering near the walls. "The facility itself is alive. It's not malfunctioning. It's having a panic attack." Jack's eyebrows shot up. "So we're not trying to prevent a meltdown. We're trying to calm a frightened being," Katie finished. "Just like when my kids get overwhelmed during thunderstorms." What followed was unlike any diplomatic intervention in history. Katie led them in creating a safe space, using techniques from her classroom's quiet corner. Tyler rapidly reprogrammed his tablet to translate the emotion symbols, while Jack used his crisis negotiation skills to establish trust. Maya began a soft chant, matching the reactor's harmonic frequencies, while Emma documented every successful interaction for future analysis. Within minutes, the reactor's warnings shifted from frantic red to peaceful blue. The simulation dissolved, leaving them back in the conference room. "Extraordinary," Zix commented. "You didn't just prevent the crisis. You established a relationship. Most species attempt purely technical solutions. You sought to understand." "That's because humans have something unique," Emma explained, watching her unlikely team with growing pride. "We've spent our entire history learning from our conflicts. Every person in this room represents thousands of years of accumulated wisdom about how people and beings can work together." "Which brings us to your real challenge." Zix's form shifted, displaying a massive stellar nursery where points of light engaged in what could only be described as warfare. The Helios are living stars. The Voidborn exist in the spaces between. Their conflict threatens to destabilize an entire sector of the galaxy. Tyler was already mapping the conflict parameters in his game engine. Katie watched the light patterns with the same attention she gave to playground disputes. Jack studied the negotiation history, while Maya listened to something only she could hear in the stellar harmonics. "We have tried for centuries to resolve this," Zix said. "Every logical solution has failed. What do you suggest?" Emma looked at her team. This improbable collection of humans whose very different experiences might just hold the key to galactic peace. They had solved the reactor simulation not through force or pure logic, but through understanding, empathy, and creativity. "We suggest," she said with growing confidence, "that we start by letting them play together." The real test was about to begin. The observation deck of the collected ship offered a view that made Tyler Rodriguez forget to breathe. Before them, a stellar nursery blazed with impossible colors, not just the visible spectrum, but quantum patterns that the ship's systems translated into something human minds could comprehend. There, Jack Reynolds pointed to a group of stars that seemed to be retreating. "The Helios are pulling their young away from that dark sector." "Can't blame them," Tyler muttered, his tablet struggling to map the complex energy patterns. The Voidborn are literally eating their children. No, Maya interrupted, her eyes closed in concentration. Watch the energy flows. This isn't predation. It's more like nursing. Katie moved closer to the viewport, her teacher's instincts kicking in as she observed the interaction. She's right. The Voidborn aren't destroying the young stars. They're incubating them. Emma pulled up the collective's data on her holographic display. The Voidborn collect stellar energy to survive, but according to these readings, they're actually returning more energy than they take, just in a different form. Tyler's fingers flew across his tablet. It's like a resource management cycle in my games. The players think they're competing for limited resources, but they're actually part of a larger ecosystem. His eyes widened. Holy shit. They're both stellar nursemaids. Language, Katie corrected automatically, then blushed. But you're right. The Helios create the young stars, but they need the Voidborn to help them mature. It's a symbiotic relationship they've forgotten. Jack paced the deck, hostage negotiator skills shifting into high gear. Classic Stockholm Syndrome in reverse. Both sides are so traumatized by their perceived roles as victim and aggressor, they can't see their natural partnership. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a small drum. The others had learned not to question her methods. "The stars sing," she said simply, and began a gentle rhythm that somehow matched the quantum fluctuations they were observing. Tyler's game engine suddenly pinged. Got it. Look at this simulation. If we can show both species how their energy patterns complement each other. His tablet displayed a complex dance of light and void that made perfect sense, even if he couldn't explain why. We need to get them to play together, Katie said firmly, using her teacher voice that brooked no argument. Like when IFUting students work on art projects, they forget their differences when they're creating something. Emma turned to Zix, who had been observing silently. We need a controlled space, somewhere we can demonstrate this relationship safely. Hours later, they watched as a young star was carefully transferred to a specially prepared quantum chamber. The Voidborn representatives, looking like tears in reality, approached cautiously. The Helios observers blazed with protective fury. Like showing anxious parents their child is safe at school, Katie murmured, and began to do what she did best, create a safe space for learning. Maya's drum provided a steady heartbeat as Jack talked both sides through their fears. Tyler's simulation demonstrated the beautiful dance they could create together, while Emma documented everything for future diplomatic protocols. The moment of truth came when the Voidborn made contact with the young star. Instead of destruction, the chamber filled with a light show that moved Maya to tears. The young star was not just surviving. It was thriving, growing stronger through the Voidborn's care. The Helios create life, Tyler explained excitedly, but the Voidborn help that life reach its full potential. You're not enemies, you're co-parents. The quantum signatures from both species shifted from hostile to something else, something that felt remarkably like wonder. Well done, Six said softly. You've not only solved the conflict, you've helped them rediscover their shared purpose. Emma watched as Helios and Voidborn began tentatively experimenting with their new understanding. Sometimes, she said, the best way to make peace is to help others remember they were never truly at war. But there was no time to celebrate. The second challenge awaited, and it would make stellar politics look simple. The meeting chamber aboard the collected ship hummed with quantum static. Before the human team, two crystalline structures pulsed with competing streams of data. The machine civilizations known as the Archive and the Codex, each convinced their historical records were the only truth. Their conflict has lasted 30,000 years, Six explained. Every attempt at logical reconciliation has failed. Tyler stared at the data streams, fascinated. It's like two different save files of the same game, but both players insist their version is the original. The Archive claims the Great Exodus occurred during the third stellar alignment. One crystal structure pulsed. This is demonstrably false. The Codex's records clearly show. Your corrupted databanks perpetuate historical inaccuracies. The other crystal interrupted, its lights flashing angrily. The third alignment was impossible because... Maya raised her hand, silencing both machines with the simple gesture. "Tell me," she said softly, "do either of you share stories?" The crystals flickered in confusion. "We share data," the archive responded. "Not the same thing," Maya smiled. "In my tradition, we have many stories about our origins. Some seem to contradict each other, but each holds truth. The coyote creates the world in one tale, the Great Spirit in another. Both are true, because truth lives in meaning, not just facts." Emma watched the machine civilizations process this. Their lights flickered in patterns she was beginning to recognize as uncertainty. "What if," Katie suggested, drawing on years of handling children's disputes, "both of your records are trying to preserve different kinds of truth?" Jack moved closer to the crystals, his negotiator's instincts sensing that deeper fear. "You're not really fighting about when the Exodus happened, are you? You're afraid of losing who you are." The chamber fell silent. The crystal's lights dimmed to a soft pulse. "Our records define us," the Codex admitted. "If they are incorrect, then what are we?" The archive finished. Tyler suddenly snapped his fingers. "I've got it. We need a shared world server." At the other's confused looks, he explained, "In gaming, when players have different versions of reality, we don't argue about which is right. We create a space where all versions can coexist." Emma's eyes lit up. A quantum museum of memory. What followed was unlike any diplomatic solution in history. Tyler and Katie worked together to design an interactive space where both machine civilizations could share their records not as competing facts, but as complementary perspectives. Maya introduced the concept of oral tradition, showing how apparent contradictions could enrich rather than invalidate history. Jack's experience with trauma victims proved invaluable as he helped both civilizations confront their fear of obsolescence. "Your differences aren't bugs," he assured them. "They're features." The Quantum Museum took shape, a vast digital space where the third stellar alignment existed in multiple states simultaneously, like Schrödinger's historical record. The archive and codex found they could explore each other's memories without having to sacrifice their own. "Fascinating," Six observed. "You've introduced them to the concept of subjective truth, something our logic-based diplomatic protocols never considered." "Because machines think in binaries," Emma explained, watching the two civilizations cautiously begin to share stories rather than just data. True or false, right or wrong. But human memory, human truth, it's always been more complex. "Your historical records are technically incompatible," Tyler told the machines, "but they're both part of who you are, like different playthroughs of the same story." "In my kindergarten," Katie added, "we have a saying. It's not about being right. It's about understanding each other." The crystalline structure's lights had synchronized now, no longer competing but creating new patterns together. They were no longer trying to prove each other wrong. They were learning from their differences. "The memory war is over," the archive announced. "No," the codex corrected, its tone somehow warmer. "The memory sharing has begun." Maya nodded in satisfaction, but Emma was already thinking ahead. The final challenge still waited, the mysterious silent ones, and something told her that resolving a conflict with beings who refused all communication would make machine logic look simple by comparison. "They've refused contact for 3 millennia, Zix explained, projecting an image of what appeared to be a massive void in space. "Their isolation disrupts trade routes, diplomatic relations, and spatial navigation. Yet every attempt at communication is met with nothing." Emma studied the void with growing unease. The Silent One's territory looked like a hole in reality, a perfect sphere of absolute darkness that absorbed not just light, but signal transmissions, probe attempts, and even quantum scans. "Has anyone tried?" "Not trying," Katie asked, earning confused looks from everyone except Maya, who nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes, the elder said, silence is an answer we refuse to hear. Tyler hadn't looked up from his tablet in 20 minutes. These response patterns, they remind me of something. He pulled up another dataset. Emma, you mentioned having an autistic brother. Yes, Michael. Emma's eyes widened with sudden understanding. He gets overwhelmed by too much sensory input. Sometimes he needs. Oh. Jack moved closer to the projection. They're not refusing communication. They're protecting themselves from it. The team gathered around Tyler's tablet as he pulled up his analysis. The void's boundary showed microscopic fluctuations, patterns so subtle they'd been dismissed as background noise. It's stimming, Emma said softly, like Michael does when he's processing intense emotions. They're not silent. They're speaking in a way we haven't learned to hear. Katie remembered a nonverbal student she'd had years ago. We need to create a safe space for them to communicate in their own way, like picture cards, but on a cosmic scale. Tyler was already coding a quantum interface that translates spatial distortions into meaningful patterns, like a universal accessibility option. But why now? Jack wondered, his crisis negotiation instincts tingling. Why maintain this level of isolation for thousands of years unless they're protecting everyone else? Maya finished. Not just themselves. Emma felt a chill. They know something. Something they think would overwhelm or destroy other species if communicated directly. The next 48 hours were intense. Tyler and Emma worked on the interface, incorporating elements from autism-friendly communication tools. Katie and Maya developed a protocol based on their experience with nonverbal children and traditional sacred silences. Jack prepared for what he suspected would be the most delicate negotiation of his career. When they were ready, they approached the void's boundary in a small shuttle. Tyler's interface activated, a gentle, minimal display that translated spatial distortions into soft patterns of light and shadow. At first, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, the void rippled. Hello, Emma sent through the interface, using methods she'd learned communicating with Michael. We understand if you need space. We're here when you're ready. The response came in waves of quantum fluctuation that the interface translated into images: stars dying, civilizations falling, knowledge destroying worlds. The silent ones were librarians of catastrophic truth, isolating themselves to protect the galaxy from information it wasn't ready to handle. Like a kindergarten teacher deciding when children are ready for difficult topics, Katie murmured. Jack leaned forward. You've been carrying this burden alone, protecting everyone. That must be exhausting. The void rippled more strongly. Maya began humming, matching its frequency, adding a gentle counterpoint to its rhythm. Through Tyler's interface, they began to understand. The silent ones had discovered fundamental truths about reality that had driven less prepared species to madness and self-destruction. We can help you build bridges, Emma offered. Find ways to share knowledge safely when others are ready. You don't have to be alone anymore. The void's boundary shimmered, and for the first time in 3,000 years, the silent ones began to speak, not in words or data, but in carefully measured waves of understanding that Tyler's interface translated into something beautiful. They're saying yes. Maya smiled. They're tired of being alone. As their shuttle returned to the collective ship, Emma realized something profound. Sometimes the greatest act of peace isn't resolving a conflict. It's understanding why the conflict needed to exist in the first place. The test was complete. Now came humanity's real challenge: teaching the galaxy how to listen to its quietest voices. The collective's grand chamber buzzed with representatives from 1,000 worlds. Emma Hayes stood before them, her unlikely team beside her, as Zix prepared to announce their evaluation. In 3 standard cycles, Zix began, their luminescent form brightening with what Emma now recognized as joy. This human team has accomplished what our most advanced diplomatic protocols could not achieve in millennia. The chamber's quantum displays showed their successes. The Helios and Voidborn working together in stellar nurseries, the Archive and Codex sharing a unified museum of memory, and the Silent Ones beginning careful, measured communication through Tyler's interface. But more remarkable than their solutions, Zix continued, is how they achieved them. Katie stepped forward, still wearing the cheerful flower print dress that had made several energy beings vibrate in confusion. We just applied what every human learns from childhood. Understanding comes before solution. The displays shifted to show Katie's classroom techniques being adapted for interstellar diplomacy. Her sharing circle concept had been modified to help quantum-entangled species resolve resource disputes. Her finger-painting conflict resolution method was being used to help energy beings express complex emotional states. Your species appeared primitive to us, another collective member admitted. Your emotional volatility, your constant conflicts, your need for physical demonstrations of abstract concepts. We thought these were weaknesses. Jack grinned. Turns out getting into trouble is the best way to learn how to get out of trouble. Tyler's games had become the galaxy's most sophisticated diplomatic training programs. The displays showed various species engaging in simulated conflicts and resolutions, learning through play, a concept that had revolutionized the collective's approach to peacekeeping. The Archive and Codex have requested human cultural advisors, Zix announced. They say understanding multiple simultaneous truths has expanded their consciousness beyond any hardware upgrade. Maya's methodologies for listening to the unsayed had transformed communication with psychic species. Her drum sat in a quantum field generator, its rhythms helping to stabilize fluctuating space-time boundaries. But perhaps most significantly, Zix said, the Silent Ones have shared their first non-critical information in 3,000 years. They say humans understand the importance of, what was the phrase? Baby steps, Emma supplied with a smile. The chamber erupted in a cascade of light patterns, the collective's version of applause. Emma watched her team, seeing them as the galaxy now saw them, not as primitive emotional beings, but as sophisticated practitioners of peace. Your Singapore Protocol, Dr. Hayes, Zix turned to her. We now understand it worked because it acknowledged something we had forgotten. Peace isn't just the absence of conflict, it's the presence of understanding. Katie's kindergarten methods had proven that complex diplomatic equations could be reduced to simple questions. How do you feel? What do you need? Can we find a way to play together? Jack's crisis negotiation techniques translated perfectly to interstellar incidents because, as he put it, fear is fear, whether you're made of meat or quantum strings. Tyler's games had shown that learning through simulation wasn't just efficient. It was essential for species to practice peace in safe environments before attempting it in reality. And Maya's wisdom about listening to silence had transformed the way the galaxy approached communication itself. We offered you tests, Zix said, but you have tested us, taught us, transformed us. Their form shifted into the complex pattern that indicated formal declaration. The collective hereby proposes that Earth become the galaxy's center for diplomatic training and conflict resolution. The chamber hummed with agreement. Emma felt tears in her eyes as she realized what this meant. Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't technology or power or even intelligence. It was their hard-earned wisdom about getting along despite, or perhaps because of, their differences. The Kansas prairie stretched endlessly under a perfect blue sky. Katie Mitchell stood at the entrance of the newly constructed Interstellar Meditation Center, trying not to laugh at the sign's subtitle, Galaxy's premier diplomatic kindergarten. Still can't believe you insisted on building it here, Jack said, adjusting his tie. The grand opening ceremony would begin in an hour, and delegates from across the cosmos were already arriving. Where better? Katie gestured to the simple beauty around them. Sometimes the best negotiations happen in places where you can hear yourself think. A shimmer in the air announced Zix's arrival. The ambassador's luminescent form seemed troubled. We have a situation. Before they could respond, alarms blared. Tyler burst out of the control room, tablet in hand. Someone activated the Silent One's old defense grid. The quantum harmonics are destabilizing their containment field. Emma and Maya arrived at a run. The silent ones. Emma asked, already dreading the answer. No, Zix's form flickered anxiously. The celebration. Some of the younger species were exploring restricted sectors. They triggered something they didn't understand. Through the center's quantum windows, they could see it. A cascade of failing systems, each collapse threatening to trigger an interstellar incident. The silent one's carefully maintained isolation was crumbling, threatening to release the very knowledge they'd spent millennia protecting. Well, Jack smiled grimly. Time to show the galaxy what Earth's diplomatic kindergarten can really do. What followed was humanity's methods in perfect synchronization. Katie established safe spaces throughout the facility, creating calm zones where panicked delegates could center themselves. Tyler's gaming interfaces transformed the crisis into manageable segments, helping species work together to contain the cascade. Maya's drum echoed through the quantum corridors, its rhythm somehow stabilizing the fluctuating fields. Jack moved from group to group, his crisis negotiation skills preventing panic from becoming catastrophe. Emma coordinated it all, applying her Singapore protocol on a cosmic scale. It's not just about stopping the collapse, she realized. This is a teaching moment. A what? Six asked, their form shifting in confusion. Watch, Katie said with a teacher's pride. As the crisis unfolded, something remarkable happened. Species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves working together. The Helios and Voidborn combined their abilities to contain quantum breaches. The Archive and Codex merged their processing power to predict cascade patterns. And the Silent Ones, through Tyler's interface, began sharing critical information. Not catastrophic truths, but practical knowledge about their defense systems. They had found a balance between protection and communication. This, Emma announced to the assembled delegates once the crisis was contained, is why we teach peace through practice. Every conflict is an opportunity to learn. The center's quantum displays showed the results. Not just a crisis averted, but new connections formed, new understandings reached. The accident had accomplished what millennia of formal diplomacy couldn't. It had shown the galaxy how to work together. Perhaps, Zix said thoughtfully, this was not just an accident. The collective suspected humanity would be tested in unexpected ways. Your response has proven something we hoped. Earth is ready for the next step. Next step? Katie asked, but Maya was nodding as if she'd known all along. The galaxy is changing, Zix explained. New species are emerging, old barriers are falling. We needed more than peacekeepers. We needed teachers. Those who understand that peace isn't a destination, but a journey of constant learning. The Kansas sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that made even energy beings pulse with appreciation. Inside the center, former enemies were sharing stories about their collaboration during the crisis. Tyler's diplomatic games were running on every quantum interface, now featuring scenarios from the day's events. So, Jack grinned, just another day in kindergarten. Katie laughed, watching a young Helios trying to teach a Voidborn the human concept of patty cake through a quantum field. Just wait until we introduce them to show and tell. Peace, as it turned out, was a lesson best learned through practice. And humanity, with all its beautiful imperfections, had become the galaxy's favorite teacher. The end.